I'd like to welcome everybody to another edition of Distilling 101, questions and answers. Somebody's been telling me I need to spice up the name of it a little bit, so we've been thinking about that. We're pushing around some ideas, but give me a second so I can post some links and we get busy. Echo there. So I'm gonna try to post my damn links here. Without getting shut down from Facebook. We'll see how far I get. I'm not guessing very far. They usually cut me off at about 10 sometimes. Definitely gonna have to try experimenting and finding better ways to share the post. It'd be nice if you guys could share some to your favorite pages if you want to. Just go to the link at the top and share it to some of your favorite groups. That would certainly help me get the message out there and help me get out to more groups because they limit me pretty heavily. Let's see. We'll see. Bear with me just a second, guys. I can't do this and see your all's page at the same time, so bear with me. Well, let that go through. I was afraid that wasn't gonna make it. All right, let me shut some of these down. What's going on, Wendell? What's up, Rousey? How's it going over in West Virginia? What's going on, Larry? Get a chance to share this around a little bit more. I sneak in a couple more. Pushing it. Definitely pushing it. I knew it. Daggone it. Yeah. Oh well. Just one moment. A few windows open there. Good. What's going on, Mr. Baker? How you browsing? What up, Gordon? Hey, Curtis. What's everybody up to tonight? Oh, shoot. Yeah. Hmm. So what's everybody up to on hump day? By having a good week so far? What's going on, Jeffrey? Cheers, everybody. Cherry Coke and a little peach brandy. Get this started off with a shot. Oh. Not bad, peach. What's going on, Marcel? Cheers to Amsterdam. Great place, man. Love to visit there someday. Had a buddy of mine went over there back in the 90s. Had a pretty good time. What's going on, Chris? Yeah, he had a pretty good time over there. That was back in the day before there's a lot of legal here. And he sent him back a bunch of some pretty OG, I guess by today's standards would be some OG seeds, some skunk #1 and some pretty much a lot of the core um, strains that a lot of other strains are made from these days, So yeah, he brought a bunch of the OG stuff back. Yes, sir. Yeah, we owe a lot to Amsterdam and their research, marijuana and the different strains and stuff. Plus, it looks like just a pretty cool place to be, man. Pretty cool, clean place. So what's everybody got going? What's everybody got running? Kind of question. I had a few questions. Some people texted me. I told them, come on and ask them. It's like 30 minutes ago. I'm like, man, I'm not going to sit and answer them now. You got to get on the show and ask them. What's going on, Morgan? What's up, brother? Yeah, so I just told them they had to come here. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the places where he went. It's been so long ago. Remember a lot of pictures he shared. But yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the strains. It's been too long and too many doobies ago, man. Can't remember. But I do remember the skunk #1. That was one of my favorites. There were some other hybrids that he brought back that were pretty good. Gonna mash to make a vodka, to make a gin for later. Awesome. What are you gonna infuse to make your gin? Excuse me. Every time I come on here, I guess I'm burping because I'm choking my food down, you know, 30 minutes prior to this, so I can get on here and do the podcast. So that's why I'm belching. All right. I thought you gonna ask you a question, Kimbo, before you leave, or what? Have fun and plunder. Cool. That sounds pretty nice. 6 gin rum working. Think about making a peach rum. Got about 40 pounds of peach puree. Man, that'd be good. Yeah, just be careful. Sometimes I know when you're doing you got your good underpit going, you don't want to get some lacto in there and run things. Those peaches, make sure you pour some pretty hot water over them to kill anything off because you don't want an early infection of lacto in those. I get quite a bit of that when I do a lot of peach. Orange and lemongrass. Man, that sounds good. Well, what was the question again, Kimbo? I can't remember. Okay, here we go. Did you hear about the distilling company that tempers rent down their aged stuff with air? Now, basically, what air tempering does is you're just allowing the more volatiles to evaporate. So some of your more volatiles can be methanol, and it can be some of your higher alcohols. So allowing those to evaporate kind of lowers the proof. Um, but you're also, you're losing some volume and you're losing ethanol at the same time. So, I tend to do that before I would go into, an aging vessel, whether it be a barrel or a jar with chips or whatever. Generally, I do the airing out first to kind of get those before a lot of the esterification and other things can take place. But after it comes out of a barrel, just good, then get some distilled water or some um, sweet water. A lot of people do that. A lot of different ways to proof. But I would go with some sweet water and water instead of doing that after the aging process. Um, yeah, I wouldn't air it out then. But yeah, airing it out after it first comes off, yeah, you can get some of those higher, more volatile alcohols and content out. Awesome. What's going on, my brother? What are you up to? What you got going on, Justin? Anything special? That's all right, brother. Hey, I can totally relate to that, man. I try not to smoke before I get on here. That way I can answer some questions because I'm going to be like, dumbfounded. What's the difference between brandy and whiskey and brandy? Yeah, yeah, Chris. Brandy's just made from fruit. Brandy is all fruit, distillate. Technically, you're not even supposed to use sugar, so you have to use all fruit in your mash or must. It'd be considered a must since it's fruit. But um, once you start adding grains, it becomes a mountain brandy, and that's something a little bit different. When you mix grains and fruit, you're kind of doing a little bit of both. So not wrong. It's just the terminologies. But whiskey and brandy, you just call it a mountain brandy, what most people call it when you start mixing your grains in with it. going on, Kenny? And some sour mash. Work has me tied down. Oh, I'm almost afraid to ask, man. You're not back into those BDSM movies, are you? I know he's got that going on his fans only page, man. He's I'm Justin, man. He gets freaky out there in Idaho. I'm kidding. uh, yeah, love me some sour mash. Speaking of which, I just happen to have some pretty good little sour mash right here. The Bloody Butcher Sour Mash Select. Compliment to Jeffrey. Thank you, sir. Cheers, Mr. Singleton. It's about 1:30, so it's spicy. A little bit, a little bit of bite to it at 1:30. It's good though. Very good. So, Chris, what do you think about? You like adding rye to your grains, or I mean rye to your brandies? Give it a little spice. Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Good stuff. Has anybody seen anything in the news this week? No, this past week, one of the largest distilleries in Kentucky might be going up on the auction block, man. If you got $250 million or so, you could probably buy it. So, man, anybody want to loan me about 249,000? Rigo Partners, 20, 250 million, yeah, 249,900,000, yeah, something like that. Sounds good. Yeah, that's a little peppery note. Yeah, there's a lot of people that do mountain brandies, to get a little bit of both. I see a lot of people. I saw some people also using talking about using apple juice in their all grains, instead of using water, so that would kind of make a mountain brandy as well of a different way. I guess that's a different way of doing it, but that's awesome, Herberto. I hope I didn't butcher your name, brother. But yeah, come to the right place, man. We had some friends down there in Mexico that make it too, and in my DIY group, we have some people down there that make some quality steels as well. Awesome. I just need about 249,000 more, man. We can do it, Ken. Yeah, it's a big distillery. It's probably one of the biggest in one of the largest in Kentucky. It's not a well-known one. They've only been in business for like 3 years now. Um, but they put in a huge facility, went all in on it, and made a first-class facility. But really, kind of dropped the ball. They didn't prepare. When you open up a distillery, you got to be prepared to do several different years without making a penny. You gotta be able to sustain while you got stuff aging. So a lot of times in the meantime, a lot of these companies order what's called MGP, multi-grain product, and it's just basically a clear whiskey that you can buy wholesale from these people that make it in large volumes. It's decent. And they blend sometimes with their own stuff, and sometimes they just, kind of make it their own by, supplementing it and then doing a few things, and then boom, it's do that for a few years before they do it. Okay, my question is about the stripping run. You run it hot and fast, and then you must run it low and slow. But do you add mash or anything when you doing this run the stripping products? Um, right. Well, it really depends on what you're doing. Um, if you're like making a brandy, I wouldn't do stripping runs on something that has a lot of flavor. And that's just me. Everybody does things differently. So when I talk about certain things like this, it's all just opinion and practice and what you find best. For me, I tend to not do a lot of multiple runs on brandies, and unless I do it like a cognac. That way I don't lose flavor. Basically, what I'm talking about is I run it, I pour it, I take the heads and fours off, and then I put the hearts and the tails back into the back set and run it again. That way, there's no flavor being lost because it's all still there inside the, all I'm being rid of is the fours and heads, and everybody does it differently. Some people say, "Oh no, if you're gonna strip, don't bother with the fours and heads. You can get them the next time and all that." But for me, if I can get four shots out, I'm going to get them out, and they're not going back in there for me to have to worry about trying to get them out again. So I know at the first, higher concentrations, I know that they run completely through the run, but there's different concentrations of it as you go, and there's some argument about that. And that's until I see some, really um, concrete evidence of percentages and that it is that way in everyone. Oh, you're doing fine, brother. You're fine. Um, but for like whiskeys and brandies, generally I try to get those off low proof, off the still and the low proof with lots of water and flavor in them, and just let them go at that. Now, if I'm doing like a rum or a vodka or something, um, or if I have just a ton of stuff to do and I plan on running it twice, yeah, you can run it all, just get the ethanol out, and then yeah, you can mix it back with a mash because you don't want to rerun anything um, with a proof of above 80. That's 40% alcohol or 80 proof. So you're going to have to proof it down, and if you're going to proof it down with some mash. With something that has flavor instead of just water. Because I think, and I agree with you, if you're just stripping it and then watering it down to run it again, yeah, you're diluting a lot of flavors for sure. So yeah, if you can run it with a mash, on your second run, and yeah, absolutely add that mash in there to keep your flavors up. And but stripping runs generally for people that like to do vodkas and they've got a lot of product and they're just trying to strip it all out and get a vat going of just high proof. That way they can mix that with water since they're going for a neutral anyway. Mixing that with water and then rerunning it um, is works out pretty well, especially for the neutrals. But yeah, I like to do anything with flavor. If I'm going to run it twice, like a brandy or a whiskey, I do it like a cognac. I just pour it right back into the back set and run it again. That way I'm not losing any flavor. I'm just taking out heads and fours each run. Okay. And yeah, you do take some flavor off. Favorite recipe? I don't really have one. I like, an all grain. I like, wheat and corn and a little bit of oats and some barley is really good. I'm not the biggest rye fan ever, so I try to minimize that. But sometimes, I don't mind putting a little bit of rye in something. But I'm more of a sweet wheat kind of guy. How fast would you run a 20-gallon on electric? How are people doing it in 4 to 5 hours? That's I just go by the drip. I as far as what you're running it on, electric, gas, whatever. I think just going by the drip and not trying to. It really depends. Sometimes I run things hard intentionally to get more water coming out of it. like a brandy or a whiskey. That way I can get more water coming off, in the vapor path, and more flavor coming off. Generally don't do that if I'm running a thumper. But if I'm using jars, infusion jars and stuff, yeah, I'll use a little higher, faster temp. But if I want a little higher proof and getting smooth, and I'll run it low and slow. And a lot of times you'll get a lot of reflux when you run it low and slow, and you get a little bit higher proof. But that sounds like, if you're stripping it 4 or 5 hours, mine, probably about 15 gallons. I put it on about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm getting a drip. In about 4 to 5 hours, I'm pretty much through the hearts. But yeah, if you're going to collect your tails, which you should do, for me, it takes a little bit longer than that. But yeah, I can get through my hearts, be done with my hearts. And probably if you have enough, wattage on a 20 gallon, you're going to be able to get through your hearts in 4 or 5 hours. But you're going to leave a lot of ethanol on those tails if you don't run them all out. But I don't have to worry about changing jars out. Once I get to the tails, I can just put a big bucket underneath there and let the shit go, let it run and let it run. I still monitor it, but not as closely. But um, yeah, yeah, you definitely want to get that ethanol out of your tails, especially if you're going to use your back set for sour mash or something. Monster mash. What you got in your monster mash, brother? It is a lot of fun trying different things for sure. So you got to tell us what your monster mash is. What's going on, Scott? Ran that Jimmy Red and apples today. Awesome. 5 quarts. That's pretty good. What proof did it come off, Scott? Yeah, I like barley. So have you ever done much single malt? Yeah, for gin, I think, doing some stripping runs for your gin would be, optimal, to get you kind of a neutral spirit, to get, away from anything other than what you're wanting to infuse. So yeah, do a stripping run, strip all your, mashes off and collect all that, proof it down with, some mash. And then in your gin basket, of course, add your juniper berries, coriander, and all your other spices that you plan on adding. Dried up orange peels, lemon peels, whatever you plan on putting in there to make it unique. But yeah, yeah, I think that's a good plan. Because I, for one, if you're making like a corn liquor, I don't think that I want to taste corn liquor in my gin. I just don't want that corn, to go along with the gin flavors. I think they would kind of clash and work against each other. It'd be weird. So, sometimes, if you want to work all that off and get that flavor off, you can, strip and or use a column, whatever you want to do. There's different deflagmators, whatever you want to do. You can do several different ways to strip and strip flavor and high, get a high proof, and then you can run it slower and with your botanicals and get a good flavored gin that doesn't taste like corn. Yeah, 14. If I run it all the way out, I think I've actually sat and done about 14, 12 to 14, to get it all the way down to nothing. Yeah, it takes quite a bit longer, because you're basically going from like 160 to 90, and then from 90 down to 10, man, it takes a while. So, it can take hours, but I do kind of crank it up when I'm just collecting tails, not enough scorch anything, but or make it bad, but I do turn it up a little bit and get on through it. Yeah, strawberry and rye is pretty good. That's a good combination for sure. Spicy. That strawberry tends to be a little hot, and add that spice to it. Yeah, man. But it didn't come out. How you infusing your botanicals? Are you using jar rigs, or you got a gin basket? You just throwing them in a thumper? Uh, Some won't, like sugar washes and stuff. They won't have much of a cap, um, unless it's like foaming yeast and stuff. I get sometimes the foaming yeast forms a little bit of a yeast cap or whatever foaming early on. But sometimes they just stay dropped. Sometimes, it depends on the speed that it's fermenting and of course what it is. But I've had some form huge caps, and I've had some form caps that never did drop, and I've had some, that never did form any caps at all. So it really depends on what you're doing, and the temperatures. If it's going slowly, it has less opportunity, probably a little less chance of forming a cap on some of them than some others. Cool. Yeah, that's good proof. 120 is perfect. Is tails lower quality? Tails contain different propanols and lower alcohols. They don't have the best taste, but there's a lot of ethanol still in there. So what happens when you capture your tails? It's not something that you just want to drink. I mean, you could. Not the best flavor. Um, But once you get done with those tails and collecting them, you can put them in your thumper. A lot of times, a lot of people do that, or you can add it to your next batch when you're ready to run, and you get that ethanol out of there without bringing in too many bad flavors like is in the heads and your foreshots. So that's the best place to recover alcohol. I know a lot of people rerun their heads and fours, trying to get the ethanol that's in there out. I don't fool with that as much, because that acetone, that flavor just kind of carries forward, and it's kind of hard to get rid of. So yeah, I tend to try to get rid of those, and and go in deep to the hearts, or I mean into the tails, and collect those up, because there's a lot of recoverable ethanol in that won't have a bad flavor. Because I mean, ethanol is ethanol. It has a specific flavor, and there's a lot of it. So when you're using those tails, you separate the ethanol on that second time that you do it from those tails. So it's not all going to taste like that. You're going to get that out up front with your hearts. It just adds to your hearts, and increases your production level. 120 blended. Okay. Yeah. So you got 5 quarts at 120. That's good. How many gallons still? Is this a 10 gallon? Okay, Mark. Peaches, let me pull up my chart here. There's so many different fruits and stuff. Let me pull up my chart, and I'll try to share this chart. Let me see if I can present image. Let me see if I can find this for you. Oh, now this will show how much sugars are in each fruit. So let's kind of go down the line here. Let's see. Peaches should be pretty. And let me get my magnifying glass out. I can't even see that. Okay, peaches right in the middle of 8.7 grams. Now, some of the peaches are going to be a little sweeter than others. So, those real hard, unripe ones, those aren't going to be as sweet as something that's kind of soft and got a few bruises and getting really mushy. Those tend to be a little sweeter. So, you're going to see some variance there. But let me find this other chart here. Here we go. Um, Now on this chart, let's see, I'm going to have to use this again because it minimizes on me when I do this. Peaches, 3 to 6 pounds. So that's how many pounds per gallon. So kind of go in between. But what you want to do is use your hydrometer. So I'd go maybe 4 pounds per gallon, 4 or 5 pounds per gallon, and see what that 8 gallons of mash. So you're going to need about 30. Let's see, what does it say again? Peaches, 3 to 6. So 3 times 8 is 24. So you're going to need 24 to 30, somewhere in there, pounds. I'd go a little heavy. I go 30 some, 34 pounds maybe. 32, that'd give you 4, be 32 pounds. But that's what the triple scale is really for, is with the triple scale hydrometer, you can make your own recipes basically. Use one of these charts like this as a guide to get you in the ballpark of how much fruit's going to give you a good flavor. This isn't set in stone. I know a lot of true brandy makers would use more fruits than what this shows. This is kind of, I think, based on people that are also using sugar. So um, which doesn't make really a true brandy, but it's economical. So unless your peaches are free and you're paying for them, then a lot of people tend to cheat a little bit and use some sugar along with it, which doesn't hurt. It's going to affect the flavor and the taste a little bit, but it take a pretty trained palate to tell the difference and what little difference there is. If you're really paying a pretty good price for these peaches, you know, it can get expensive. Fruit can get expensive. So, but if you're getting it free, yeah, try to maximize the fruit per gallon, but use your hydrometer. So we got the triple scale hydrometer, and basically, let me grab one. Hold on, let me grab one. All right, so we've got a triple scale hydrometer, and this is what it's going to look like. It's the one with the colors like this. Okay, so when you drop this down into your fruits and stuff, you want to kind of take just the liquid and hold on, let me grab this too. All right, here we've got a graduated cylinder, and I keep it weighted down. These are all my ferrules, gaskets for my ferrules, and it helps keep it heavy so it doesn't want to topple over. So if you want a good place to keep all your gaskets, right there's a pretty good spot, and it keeps it from toppling over. It makes it bottom heavy. Little tip you learned here. But when you fill this up, fill it with just the juices because a lot of fruit around it. I see a lot of people just drop this in their bucket right into the cap and the fruit and stuff. So it will affect everything um, on your buoyancy. So what you want to do is when you're doing brandies like this and making your own recipe, you use the fruit and the water, and you drop this down in there, in some of that's been strained off. And when you do, it'll give you an idea of how much sugar is in your solution based on what's in it. Now, I don't know if y'all can read this. Probably not. No, this camera's not going to focus that closely. But anyway, it'll start up here at 1.00, and then go into the 0.9s. But when it's that far down, you know you don't have much sugar. The higher this is floating, that means more sugars are in there, so it's thicker, more, more viscous. So you don't want to go into the gray. Once you get into the yellow, kind of getting into the danger zone there. But once you get into the gray, you're above 1.1, and that's going to be pretty hot stuff. So generally, you try to stay in the blue, and the blue goes from 1.035, which is basically a beer, to 1.060. But in the yellow, 1.07080, you're still pretty good. So what you do, you drop this in and take your reading, and say, you've got 6 pounds of fruit per gallon, and you're getting a 1.070, you're good to go. You're ready to go. But if you've got a bunch of fruit and you've used all your fruit in the water, and it's like 1.1 and it's in the gray, then you can just add some more water to bring it down to the 1.07080 range for a decent brandy. And you just need to add a little bit of water, or maybe some apple juice or something like that. So you're not just diluting flavors; you're adding some kind of flavor to it. But that'll generally work. But if you're low, like down here into the red and before you're blue, you're like, well, I'm gonna have to add a little sugar if I want to get some production out of this. So it's time to add a little bit of sugar. So if you have a low gravity starting out, you can add some sugars and bring that up. And if it's high, you can add some waters to bring it down and dilute it down a little bit. So that's why it's essential that you have this proofing hydrometer, because with that, you can make the recipes. Recipes is basically how much ingredients to water ratio. Unless, of course, you're dealing with, like we were talking about earlier, a gin, and then you got some different things going on for your gin basket. You got spices involved and other things. But just for like a general all grain, once you convert your grains, you've used this, and if you need to bump it up, you can use a little sugar, or a little glucose or dextrose, or corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, whatever you want to use to bump up the gravity a little bit to make it worth the while and get a pretty decent amount, on your production. So that's generally how you use it, Mark. So having that will allow you to determine, what works out best. So you make your, 5 to 10 run, do shoot for like a 13-gallon or so mash, because there's always going to be a few behind, that you don't use, and that way you're not trying to strain everything to get the 10 that you need. So I'd definitely get your hydrometer. It's essential in getting your mash set up properly. It's essential to see, how much conversion you got and how much sugar you have after your conversion, if there's no starches present with your iodine test. So, and with your brandies, you tell you, you need to either add some more fruit per gallon or some sugar, to bring it up, or vice versa, some juice or water to help bring it down a little bit. I think apple juice is 1.040 last time I checked. So, you could actually lower it using apple juice and keep a decent flavor profile, if you don't mind a little apple being in there, or strawberry juice or whatever kind of juice. Just make sure you get the 100%, all natural type juices. That way you're not, you're not going to get a lot of preservatives and stuff in there that are going to, kind of clash with your yeast. I hope I answered your question, Mark. If you still have some questions on that, follow up with another question. 22 pounds. Okay, so 22 pounds. It's going to be a little light for 10 gallons. So, for five, you're going to have a little bit more than four. So, like a 5-gallon run, I think you'd be good. If you want to add some sugar, you could probably bump that up to 7. So, definitely, either way, if you want to get a little bit more production, you can add a little bit of sugar to that and a little bit more water. But again, use that hydrometer and it won't fail you. Yes, sir. Always keep those tails, man. It's going on Olympic Day. Tomato shine. I've somebody was talking about that a few weeks ago using tomatoes. I've never done it personally, but you know, I don't see why not. Have you tried it? Peated. Oh, so you have done a single malt. That sounds interesting, man. Yeah, I've never done a single malt before. I've done a mixed malts and all that, but I've never done just like all barley before. I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it. Yeah, I've not tried it, but yeah, they scotches can get pretty heavy, man. I mean, it's awesome. So you get you a bad mo. I've got one sitting behind me here. Of course, you tell it ain't full the way I'm handling it, but yeah, they're good little barrels, man, for sure. I didn't know that. Oh, medium toast. It's telling me the chart was on it. Yeah, it's got everybody's autograph on it. We all signed that for somebody and gave it to them, and they put it up for an auction for. I guess it was for helping the flood victims in North Carolina or South Carolina, Tennessee, and or North Carolina, Tennessee, and so we had an auction, and I bought that at the auction. Yes, sir. All right, brother. Yes, it's a little late on that side of the pond, man. We'll be back on here Saturday night, same time, same bat channel. So try to catch up with us in. Salute to Amsterdam. Let's have a shot for Amsterdam. I definitely want to visit there sometime. For sure. Very cool place, man. But yeah, this chart, if someone wants it, you can screenshot that or ask me for it, and I can forward it to you if we're on Facebook or Facebook Messenger. I haven't figured out how to do that on YouTube or Twitch or Rumble or Kick yet. So if I think all this is posted in the militia files. So if you're on the in the join the militia, and you can go at the top of the militia page, just click on where it says files, and you'll find it up there in the files. I've got to add some more. I've been kind of busy as of late, so I definitely need to add a bunch more, but we're getting there. Let's see you on Saturday, Dopey. Yes, I'm paying attention to all the threads, Mr. Dave. But I missed something. Let's see. I've got some heated grain, made a double distilled spirit. It's been in the bad mode for about 2 years when I drink it down. Awesome. Yeah. Did I miss something else? Yeah, I love peat. Peated liquor's good. But I've not done an all. Oh, tomato. I've not done it, man. I have no thoughts. I'd like to try it, but I've not done it. I don't know anybody that's done it. There's a couple few weeks ago we were talking about different things. A lot of different things to run, and tomatoes and kudzu. There was a lot of different things that we were discussing, trying to run and stuff. And I think tomatoes was part of the discussion. And but I don't know that I talked to anybody that did it. But I'm gonna have a little gander here and see what Mr. Google says about it. So I'm not sure how much starches are in a tomato. Let me Google that first. Starches in a tomato. Small amount of starch, so they're primarily classified as a non-starchy vegetable. So probably not going to get a lot of sugar conversion, from something like that. So it might be something more of a flavor. I have heard of people using tomatoes for a yeast nutrient in some of their neutrals, like doing a sugar wash. So I have heard of people, that are actually using tomatoes to um, provide yeast nutrients, and they do provide a ton of nutrients for yeast, except yan and fan, which is really essential. So they do have a lot of micronutrients. They've got calcium. They've got a lot of essential vitamins and stuff that's going to really help a fermentation. But you're still going to need some DAP or something else in there to provide some fan and yan, which is yeast assimilable nitrogen and free amino nitrogens, in to help feed the yeast, because like in a lot of the sugar washes and stuff, or in some of the brandies as well, you really don't have a lot of nutrients, like you would in a malted grain. There's tons of nutrients in that, but like with just most of your fruits, there's just not enough yeast assimilable nitrogen and fan in there to really um, be fully. Now that's not saying you can't do it without it. It's just that your yeast aren't going to be as happy, and you're going to probably get some off flavors as a result. Um, there's a bird watcher recipe out there that people use a lot of tomatoes in tomato paste and all that. I think that's what they call that specific recipe is a bird watcher recipe. But I noticed in it that they use like a shitload of yeast, and I'm guessing some of the yeast is dying and feeding the other yeast because the tomato alone is really not going to be sufficient. But I think that might be where you're seeing some of the tomato being included in a mash. I know that birdwatcher recipe though, it has it in it, and it does help. I mean, there's some good nutrients in it. I'm not knocking the tomatoes; they do have some really good, you know, biotins and and other nutrients that the yeast loves. So I mean, it's probably a great supplement too, just like a DAP if you want to use like a diammonium phosphate or a Fermate or Fermax or Fermo. All those are pretty well balanced. But if you wanted to add a little bit of the tomato paste, it's not going to hurt unless it affects the flavor. So probably wouldn't do that with a wine. But like a sugar wash, absolutely, yeah. And I agree, it would probably help flavor a Bloody Mary. I was thinking about my fiance makes this killer um, tomato. What do you call it? You dip with salsa. Thank you, dear. She makes some killer salsa. She's listening to me back there. But she makes some of the best damn salsa, man. It's so good. So using something like that as a base for like a salsarita or a Bloody Mary or something like that. Absolutely, man. Yeah, yeah, you got to watch your acid. But really, people don't realize it, but most of your fermentations need to be acidic. And a lot of the, let me see if I can find this chart. Might take a while, but we maybe we'll put that off. I'll just make a note of getting it and try to talk about it next time and uploading it to the militia file. But there's a chart somewhere that shows just like the pH of most of your fruits and vegetables and stuff. And a lot of people would think a lot of these fruits are higher acidic than what they actually are. So, in a good fermentation, we want the ferment or the mash or must to be slightly acidic, in 5.3, 5.2 range, which is pretty, it's a pretty decent level of acid. And, that'll help promote yeast health. And it also helps keep a lot of bad stuff, microbes and bacteria and stuff from building up in the mash itself. So, that lack of oxygen and that, slightly acidic um, mash will help keep some of your, bad stuff at bay and help for more healthy fermentation. So a lot of times it's not as bad as what you think, but yeah, you definitely want to have a pH meter or some um, paper. I use a litmus test paper. Basically, it's for kombucha. I'm not, I'm not saying the bird watchers is necessarily good. Don't use limbic, Dave. Don't use as much yeast as what they say, because they're really using way too much yeast in most of those recipes that I've seen. Um, and no, I wouldn't. You can, but it's really not. You don't want to speed it up. Anytime you're trying to speed up the process, really, you have to be really patient with making wines and in the whole process. Really, you just need to have patience and time. I stir it up initially. You want it aerobic when your yeast are just getting started and breeding. And that's its lag phase. You can read about the lag phase in your fermentation. That's when you want it aerobic. You want high oxygen, so that kicks the yeast into reproducing. So, and it gets more yeast in there, and that will help it alone go faster. So doing that at the very beginning, super oxygenated, is a big plus. But during fermentation, you don't want it to go from eating and creating alcohol back to breeding and making babies again. It stresses it. It can cause a little bit of a overload of yeast. It can cause off flavors and stress the yeast. So best to just give her a really good stir at the very get go. And of course, unless you have to, if you don't have the crushed oyster shells in there and your pH isn't buffered and it's dropping down close to the twos, and the low threes getting close to two, and it's just going down. You may have to use some baking soda as an emergency measure, because that is better than just letting your yeast get killed off. And so, but to prevent that, it's good to use your crushed oyster shells from the very get go. Yeah, I mean, a couple days in, it'd be all right. It'll be all right. It's just like, a lot of your fruit mashes and stuff sometimes take 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes four, sometimes more, So, yeah, you don't want to be constantly stirring, 5, 7, 12 days out, day one or two. Yeah, that's not going to be as much of an issue as further on down the line. But yeah, it's probably better to add that nutrient and stir it in a little bit than to not. But with your cap, just gently press your cap down the first, week or so, 4 or 5 days at least. Just gently press that cap down with something flat. Use a little spatula or something. Just gently press it down, keep it moist. Then you can put your lid, airlock, whatever you got going on over that. But it helps keep your cap moist. It's good to keep that cap moist. So, but the bird watchers, yeah. I don't like it because of the amount of yeast that they use. So don't use any more yeast than you normally use. Just use the birdwatcher recipe and add the tomato, but add a little DAP or your nutrients and just go that route instead of using a shitload of yeast like they do. Because I sat and I tried for the life of me to figure out where they're getting nutrients, from. And then finally I looked at them like, well, damn, you're putting how many grams of freaking yeast in there? That's 5 gallons and you're using how much? They're like 5 tablespoons. It's crazy. It's like, well, that's got way too much yeast in it. So I guess they're just fighting through the yeast stress and the lack of nutrients by forcing some yeast to die and compete with others and die and be cannibalized. But that's a stressful environment for them. It's better just to boil some yeast and let it cool and pour the dead yeast in there. Let them eat that instead. If you don't have any DAP or any malts or anything like that to feed them. But yeah, I'm looking at. There's really not a lot of starch in your tomatoes. Um, so I'd say it's going to be tough just to ferment the tomato itself. I'm not saying you can't, but it's they're relatively low in carbohydrates and carbs and starches, but they do contain lots of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and some good stuff too, the botans and calcium, which are both essential. So good and bad. Yeah, swirl you bucket swirler. Yeah, if you can get tomato wine and distill it, I'd say that's probably made with just tomatoes and sugar, or something to sweeten it up with. I've never heard of tomato beer or tomato brandy, tomato wine. But yes, Chris, don't disturb your yeast bed. When you got that brandy going and you got stuff settling down, I don't like stirring up all that yeast and all that trub in the bottom. I like to let that stuff settle down because it takes long enough for it to clear. And I don't use clearing agents or thinning agents or anything like that. So I generally don't do a lot of stirring. um, I've been talking to somebody else about that this week. They were talking about stirring versus not, and they've been stirring a lot of their wines, and they've got some YouTuber that they've been watching, and he seems to make pretty good wines and winning some contests and stuff. And I'm assuming he's probably doing a lot of like the Welch's wines, and he's doing a lot of different fruits and stuff. And I checked his page and stuff, and it's fine. I mean, there's no set rules that you can't. It's just mixed results if you do, with some things. So, that's one thing we try to get away from is a lot of the things that I'll talk about are just my opinion and what I found is best. There's certain things that are facts, and then a lot of other things are just an opinion. And there's so many ways to do this. I mean, saying you can't ferment a tomato. No, I'm not saying that at all. But it would be very difficult. It'd be very low yield. So I'm sure if you do, you'd have to get some carbs or sugars from somewhere to increase the yield to make it worthwhile. But I'm not saying that you couldn't. Just like stirring. Some people stir their wine up the whole time. They stir it up every day, and throughout the whole run, they'll stir it up, and then right at the end when it's time to clear it and everything else, they start pouring in chemicals and thinning agents and stuff like that to try to clear it all out. I'd rather not use all those chemicals and stuff. A lot of people say they don't, you can't taste them and all these things, but it's just an extra expense, and you can get the same or arguably better results if you don't. So probably not the best idea to. It's not saying that you can't, but it gets really yeasty tasting, and it's just, yeah, it's just not good when you do it that way. It's in my opinion, especially when you're trying to use clearing agents and stuff, and it's just, I mean, I've heard people using rice husks and egg whites and super clear and all this other stuff, and nothing does better than just patience and time. Just let that stuff settle out, rack it off into a secondary fermenter, put that on an airlock, let that sit, let it settle out, rack it into another one, and to make a wine, and let it sit until you're ready to bottle it is definitely the way to go. Stirring it up, nah, it just increase the time that it takes to wait for it to settle, for secondary. That's right. Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's a fact. That's right. Uh, we try to do them on Wednesdays at 8 and Saturdays at 8. So save up your questions, bring your buddies in, and anytime you got something going on, jump in here and let us know what's happening. Got any questions? We'd be happy to answer them. Or, well, if I don't know the answer, I'll get on. I'll try to find you a good answer. If I don't know it, I'm not gonna bullshit you or lie and say, give you some bullshit reply. I'm gonna jump on, like everybody else does, and Google it and try to find a good legitimate source of information, because I don't know everything. Contrary to popular belief, I don't know it all, nor do I profess to. So, a lot of people try to be that person. I'm not. So if I'm not sure about something, I'll be the first to tell you, and we'll find the answer. And there's usually really good sources. I've got some sources that I use on the internet. I don't really go to Reddit and some of that YouTube as much as is some of the more distillers, um, what's the name of that? Distillers.org and all that. You can get mixed results there, but like the Distilling Institute, yeah, you can get really good answers there. So if I'm not sure of something, I always try to double check it, because I'm not going to sit here and talk about like tomatoes if I don't know about them. Awesome. Well, man, that's what we're here for. We're all in the hobby together. I'm learning at the same time. Like tonight, I learned about tomatoes, so I'm trying to help teach, but at the same time I'm learning, and if you're not learning, you're stagnant. So, we're all helping each other, we're all learning together, and we have a pretty good time in here doing so, you know. So get on Facebook if you're on Facebook, and look up Moonshine Militia and join us there, and you can ask your questions any day of the week, any time of the day there. And we've got some vampires like me that are up late and early in the morning, and we got people on there, usually 24/7 talking and doing stuff. Yes, sir. No problem. Yeah, you talking about Alan Bishop, I'm assuming. Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. He's extremely knowledgeable dude. Great guy too. Definitely. Yeah, we both try to help all we can. He's busy though, man. He's got so much going on with his new distillery and all the stuff they've got going on. It's exciting to watch his videos and see the progress that they're making up there. I want to try to make it up there. I visited him once before, and of course I would pick the day that they're off to go visit, and so I didn't get a chance to see him. But my fiance and I are going to try to maybe take a trip up and go see him at the resort now that they have, the distillery resort. I think I'm trying to think of the name of it. Here goes my memory again. I can't believe it. Something adventure. Shit. What's it called? Old Homestead. Yeah, that's it. On Dakota Lake. Yep, that's it. Yeah, I can't remember things, man. I have the worst memory. I remember a lot of stuff that I've known for a long time, but it's like recent stuff. Sometimes, like the other day, man, it took me like 30 minutes to come up with the word funnel. I was trying to come up with funnel, and it's just common words like that that sometimes stump me. Yeah, I've had all this science and shit, and it's like, man, I can't even come up with simple words, man. Getting old sucks. Take my word for it. Getting old sucks. But we work through it, push through it. I'll have my fiance behind me filling me in. What's going on, Tony? Or usually Lisa. She'll chime in with an answer when I'm stuck. So if I get stuck and don't feel bad about chiming in and answering or finishing my sentence or helping me out, I appreciate it. I also appreciate you guys when I get behind a lot. There's some also very knowledgeable people that frequent this podcast that are very knowledgeable, and they help me out a lot. And they answer a lot of questions before I get to it. So I do appreciate that. I know sometimes they think maybe he doesn't want us doing that, but no, I really appreciate the help. And I'll only say something if there's something that I want to add to it, or if something I disagree with, maybe. No, no, not Middleton. Middletown. No, this is in Indiana. Indiana. He used to be at French Licks at the Spirits of French Licks distillery, but he moved from there to a new one, and it's called Old Homestead, and it's near Patoka Lake in Indiana. I know. Well, I think what it is, I've got apnea, and I'm probably not getting a lot of oxygen when I sleep, so that may contribute to it. I'm tired all the time. I don't ever feel like I'm rested, so we're gonna have to go to a sleep class and all that. And I know it does me too, Roger. It's getting worse as I get older. So, all right, what's going on, Tony? How much change in smell? And should you still have some action, like with very few bubbles still working after rack 2 months ago racking? One is this a brandy, Tony, or what kind of brandy do you got? And yeah, you'll get some little bit of bubbles and stuff. Yeah, John Benson, another great guy, man. Yeah, John. Yeah, is it yeah, that's Middleton. Up on the river there, close to the river, the border. Yeah. John's a great guy. He's about to open up. So let's see. Let me get back to Tony. Ask me, brother, what kind of brandy you got going on? First sour mash. All right. Oh, grain whiskey. I'd say if it's a grain, it should. You got your hydrometer or tasting it to see, how sour it is. What's a beginner still and recipe to start for the first timer? Awesome question, Michael. Always love the first time in here. Let's see who we can help the most. Yeah, Richard, that's what I was trying to think of, CPAP. And how is it working for you? Does it help clear your head, and did it make a big difference? Because I'm definitely going to do it. Michael, uh, really depends on how much you want to spend. It's a question that's been asked and answered 1,000 times, and I'm happy to answer it 1,000 more. Um, it really depends on how much you have to spend, whether you can afford copper. or are we going to go stainless? You can start with a beer keg, a simple 15.5 gallon beer keg, 15-gallon beer keg, and a few slight modifications, getting a little column to come off of it or a little head to come off of it, and condenser. You can get in pretty cheaply that way. There's some stainless pots out there made by many different companies, Bever being one of the more popular ones. They're pretty inexpensive as well. They make a little football steel. We call it football steel. It's basically a stainless pot. I'd recommend maybe a 13 to 18. But it's a stainless pot, and it has a kind of a dome shaped lid, and then it's got like a football head on it, and it's a rectification head, but it's good for brandies and whiskeys, and it comes complete. And those are around, for 18 and a half, I think on eBay and Amazon, around 230. But beer kegs, you can get a beer keg for like $35. You can talk to Phil Billy, and there's a bunch of other people that have like heads and jar rigs and caps and all that kinds of other things that you can put on these kegs to make them work. You can take the ferrule off the top, and we have a larger one welded to facilitate cleaning. You can put ferrules, have holes cut, weld ferrules into the sides, 2-inch ferrules in the sides for electric elements if you want to go all electric with it. There's a lot of options, and things that you can do. Alembic, Dave, Olympic copper steels are awesome. Being copper, they're a little bit more expensive. Beautiful steels, handcrafted. It's folk art. It's very artsy and very good for brandies and whiskeys too. Those make good steels. So it's just according to what you can afford. But I think that the Vevers or the keg steels are pretty cheap and easy for a beginner to get into and get started. And the first mash is definitely going to be a sugar wash, and that's just so you can clean everything up, check for leaks, and dump it. It's not something that you're going to want to keep. You're going to be kind of washing fluxes out as it boils and does its things. You're going to be cleaning out the schmeg in the beer keg. There's going to be some bad odors probably there. So anything new that you want to add to it, you're kind of cleaning that out as well. So just a good old cheap sugar wash, and run that through, and don't drink it, just pitch it, use it to kill some grass or wash windows or disinfect the countertops or whatever you want to do with it. But generally, we don't, the sacrificial runs like that, just kind of running it through. And it also helps check for leaks, see if you got anything leaking going on. So, yeah. Let's see. Can't think of bever and mash, first timer. I wouldn't even do the corn. I just do water and sugar and nutrients and just do that. Just don't even waste the corn because it's going to be sacrificial your first run. A lot of people don't do sacrificial runs, but I think it's a good thing too. And here's my reason why. As we all know, there's solvents. There's generally three types. You got something that's water soluble, something that acid breaks down and soluble, and then there's things that are soluble with alcohols or gasolines or things like that. So once you run, like a vinegar run, and a vinegar and water both kind of get both taken care of everything at once. But sometimes there's certain oils and greases from factories and some other things that water and vinegar don't touch, but an alcohol or something like that would definitely, be a solvent for it. So it rinses it and cleans it off. So I like to do all three. It's not essential, but it's your health. Think of it as you will. For me, for a $5 bag of sugar and some time, yeah, it's yeah, just do it. Well, that's awesome, man. I need to feel rested and I need my head cleared. Maybe if I smoked a little less weed, that might help too. First was Olympic 10-gallon, easy to run clean. Yeah, yeah, I agree. They're nice deals. Yeah, I've heard that some people have trouble sleeping in it. So Richard's got a football steel as well. I've got a football steel. Sometimes I use the football. Sometimes I've got a little column I put on it. It's great for inside. It's great for use on top of the stove if you have a stove that runs constantly. Now a lot of people will use stoves that when you turn things on high, you have to look at the stove, and the coil type really generally aren't as good because they cycle on and off to maintain a heat. Mine's the infrared type with the glass top, and when I go to like 8 or 9 on mine, which is high, it's just on all the time. So it doesn't go red, then clear, then red, and heat up. You don't want that cycling. So you want something that's going to be a pretty constant temperature, regardless of what your heat source is. You want a fairly constant temperature. That's not saying you can't change the temperature during the run. It's just that you don't want it constantly fluctuating throughout the run. So a lot of people crank things up. Once they get to a drip, they'll back off and adjust their drip. That's generally how I do it as well. On the glass top stove with the Vever, it works really well. It's an old Frigidaire stove. It's got the 5 elements. The front one's like 3,200 watt. The back one's like 2,200 watts, and then the warmer in the middle. I use them all, crank them up, and all those together work very well. I'm dripping within 45 minutes to an hour, and I can be done in about 4 hours. Um, about the same on a propane, but propane's a bit more expensive. But I generally use the propane outside when I do outside during the summers when I use the bigger pot, or when I'm using keg steels and thumpers and all that stuff. I do it a little bit differently outside, and when I'm cooking, I use the gas. So just depending on what you're doing, but um, definitely I think bevers and keg steels are a great inexpensive way to get started. And then once you get hooked, then you want to probably maybe upgrade to a copper if you can afford to, or at least adding some copper in the vapor path to help remove some of the sulfurs and sulfides that are in some of the distillates. Awesome. Nothing wrong with that, brother. Yeah, yeah. White vinegar and water is great, but a good sugar shine to follow up with, just to get that. Because what I've done is the same, and even with stainless, you don't really need the vinegar, with stainless unless you got some copper somewhere in it to help, to clean that up. But I did notice that after cleaning my stainless very well, um, I after I did my first run, I took some heads and a white cloth, nice white cloth, and I got some heads and got it wet and just went inside that beverage, just scrubbed it, rubbed it real hard, and rubbed it. And I looked at that white rag, and it was very, very gray. And I'm assuming those are probably buffing compounds they use to polish it, or some of the greases they use in the pressing, or maybe some buffing compounds that they use to buff it into a shine. I'm not sure, but yeah, there was a lot left over after the first run, the sacrificial run. So even then, sometimes it's good to just take a good old, take some heads and go in there and really rub it, get a lot of elbow grease. Don't bend it up, but really get at it, and you'll get a lot of that off, for sure. Thank you so much for first recipe run. Um, I wouldn't recommend it. It's a little bit more complicated because you're using back sets, and you're going to need some oyster shells to help make buffer, and you're reusing grains, and you're going to need hydrometers to measure sugars and how much to add, and until you get kind of into a groove. So I think for the first timer, I think just a good old sugar wash with some nutrients. A lot of times people just do the sugar and yeast, and they don't get the nutrients in there, and it stalls out. It becomes very acidic because it works off really quickly. So there's no nutrients. There's no buffers in there, so it becomes acidic, stressing the yeast. There's no nutrients stressing the yeast, so it tastes crappy. So if you can take care of that, buffer it, and get you some nutrients in there, then no, Mitch, you got lucky, brother. Now we do it on Wednesdays, 8 Eastern. We start at 8 Eastern on Wednesdays, same time, same bat channel every Wednesday, and on Saturdays. So if you're on Facebook, you can join the militia, and we've got different podcasts going, different people doing different podcasts, different topics. Sometimes it's more informative than others. Sometimes it's just sitting around talking shit, doing the shit show like on Friday. So, but join up the militia. That way you can ask your questions anytime you want to, and you'll get a decent answer, and you won't get trolled like a lot of places. So that's one of the reasons we created the group. A, to help people. B, to avoid people, getting trolled for asking a simple question, because generally everybody has the same questions when they first get started. So just like just like who was it? Well, who was it? Just asked. Oh, first timer Mitch. You know. So yeah, we'll get asked that question a bunch, and we're happy to answer it every time the same way. So definitely join up, and we'll help you out. Oh wait, no, it wasn't you. It was somebody else. Who was that? Who asked that? Oh, it was Michael asking for a beginner recipe and for the best steel to start out with. So yeah, we're here every Wednesday, brother, and Saturday. So jump in here and have your questions. Bring you a shot, and we'll sit and drink and talk about what we got working off and what we got dripping off, or what we drinking. That's right, brother. That's what it's all about. One of these days, you know, who knows, that we may be making this to clean wounds and to barter with. If the shit hits the fan, you never know. But it's a good hobby to learn and to know. Making wines and stuff. It's like back in the old days, man, when they didn't have good clean water. They relied on the alcohol and the wines and the shines and stuff, to distill things to make it a little safer to drink. So what nutrients? There's a lot of different nutrients, but generally speaking, you can get what's called diammonium phosphate. It's called DAP for short. You can get it on YouTube or Amazon, or eBay. Most of those places, your brew stores. A lot of people knock it, but the way I see it, the largest distilleries in the world use it. The some of the most fine wine makers use it, that make some of the best wines in the world. So if those guys are using it, I'm going to listen to them instead of some clown that says it's horrible. It's the worst thing to use ever. So yeah, whatever. They're decent to use. I mean, there's other things that you can do, but for the money, for the cost, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's the same. You can do with the Fermaid, the Fermax, the Fermo for organics. If you prefer an all organic, you know, nutrient, but it's just the essential things that yeast need to do a fermentation. Now, certain things like malted grains and a lot of your grain, unless it's like an all corn, sometimes a little bit of nutrients in all corn wouldn't hurt unless it's malted corn. But anytime you got like malted grains, that alone is all you need as far as nutrient wise. Everything's in there: yam, fan, minerals, and things of that nature that you need. I'm sure there could be some supplemental things that you can add. Some people like to break up some vitamins and drop in there, which is fine. Just make sure that you don't do iron. You don't want a lot of iron in your fermentation. Iron's a big no-no. So You definitely don't want that. But um, Adapt, I think a pound of it's like $12 on Amazon, and it'll last you years. It'll last unless you do a whole lot. It doesn't take much. It's just little teaspoonfuls, so it'll last a long, long time. And I found it's a lot cheaper than pretty much anything else. It's like 20 some cents per 10 gallon. It's just negligible, the cost, and it does a fine job, and it's everything you need's in there. There are some other things like we were talking about earlier that tomatoes could bring that might not be in Adapt, like some botans and some things like that. But essentially everything that you need will be in Adapt. And a lot of people talk about urea, and it's getting distilled, man. This is something, especially there's a lot of people that use the urea, and it's in the wine, and it's not urine. So I don't know, a lot of people don't understand the science, and don't understand distillation, taking a lot of these things out. So, but like I say, some of the finest wines use it. Some of the finest distilleries in the world use them. So, I guess it can't be all that bad. It has been, Kenny, yes, it has been postponed because of the flooding. I'm going to talk to Donnie and Teresa and maybe have them on a future podcast and go over, for what time it's being rescheduled to. But as far as I know, yes, it has been postponed. I found that out this past Saturday. Yeah, this is the place to geek out. I'd like to get Alan on here sometime as a guest as well. I know he's busy, and I know he'd love to be able to do something like this, but he's busy. He's got a family, he's got a distillery. He's swamped right now, man. He's trying to get things going and rolling, and yeah, man, it's all they can do. But I know he'd love to be able to do something, have the time to do something like this. He does answer some questions from time to time, but I think he'll look at his YouTube channel, and some people ask him questions, and he'll make a little video recording and answer their questions, and take care of it that way, because it's really hard to dedicate yourself to being at a certain place at a certain time, a couple of days a week like I do. So I know it's probably going to be real tough for him to do that, and so, but yeah, it's fun. All right, here we go. 1 can of paste, 12 pounds sugar, 6 gallons of water, and yeast. Boom. Um, Absolutely. Yeah, definitely inverting helps a lot. So is this the 1 gallon of the tomato paste, 12 pounds of sugar, 6 gallons of water, yeast, and DAP. Don't forget the DAP, because that tomato paste isn't going to have enough nutrients. It's not going to have all the nutrients that you need. It's Yan and Fan, YAN and FAN. Read about those. Google it. Read about them. It's yeast assimilable nitrogen and free amino nitrogen. And you really need your yeast needs those to be happy and to be less stress. Once you get into distilling and learn about how the yeast work, you'll soon learn that stresses can cause off flavors, and off flavors can be most of the time not good. It's not a good thing, but sometimes you can experiment. You might land on something that's good. That's kind of an advanced topic, but you really want to keep your yeast as happy as possible to get a good consistent result every time. So if you follow the certain practices, certain temperatures, and I hate saying it, but get more scientific, because a lot of people hate that word and kind of resist science like I do, calculus. Um, it it but it's really not that a big a deal. We're just talking about temperatures, pHs, and gravities, and external temperatures, um, and measuring, all measurements, amounts, times, procedures. And a lot of old moonshiners, they've learned from the recipes and from watching others, and they've learned how to do the science from repetition. And it's still a science. What you're doing science, you may not realize it or not, but you're still doing a controlled experiment every time you do it. And if you over the years you fall into a pattern, a rhythm, and you get a consistent product. And that's really the toughest thing to do is maintain consistency. And that's what you really have to do to have a really successful um, distillery or product. And you want to be able to replicate it and have it the same every time, um, following a strict you know set of rules and procedures and guidelines will definitely help get something more consistent. So that's definitely what you want to do. Yeah, inverting sugar. A lot of people that don't know, going back to it, like what we were talking about, keeping your yeast happy. Yeast prefer eating a monosaccharide, which means one sugar molecule. But there are some, like table sugar, that's a disaccharide. It's two molecules bound together. It's bound together with what's called a glycosidic bond. So in the case of table sugar, it's a fructose and a glucose bonded together, and your yeast can eat those, but not as happily as if it were a monosaccharide, like a dextrose will give you. So people that don't want to pay for dextrose try to do what's called an inversion of the sugar. So basically, um, yeah, I got your question next day. So basically, to break this up, you're going to use heat and acid as a catalyst to break that glycosidic bond to create two individual molecules, fructose and glucose, out of a table sugar, which is sucrose. So I think you heat it to, I'm going to have to, I think I said it last week, 236. I think it's 236 or, yep, 236. Damn, I'm getting better. 236 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, and you can use citric acid. It's very handy to keep citric acid handy. I use it a lot. I use it to raise pH in mashes. I use it in winemaking. It's used in steel cleaning. There's a lot of uses for it. And inverting sugar is yet another use. So you can use that, or you can use lemon juice, whatever. But you heat the sugar up, and you have to do it really slowly. You don't want to convert the sugar into, a polysaccharide, which if you turn it into, what do they call it? If you take your sugars and brown them, and you what's that called? Like the candy. Here's the brain farts coming in again. Man, I'm getting too old for this. Um, what do they call that? What's it called, Hein, when you brown the sugar to make a candy? Caramelization. So when you caramelize that sugar, and it starts turning a little tan and yellow, you're actually creating polysaccharides, and you're defeating the purpose, because you're taking a sucrose, and actually you're bonding bunches of sucroses together, and making a polysaccharide. So you have to be really slow when you bring the heat up to invert this sugar, and you don't want to go too slow. You have to constantly stir. You don't want sugar, like grains of sugars and stuff, to collect on the pan around the rim where you're stirring it, because somehow, man, it's strange, but that that little bit of granular sugar on the rim around the pot can cause the whole inverted sugar to fail and crystallize. So you want to keep all those crystals pushed down. You can get one of these silicone brushes and with a little bit of water, and while you're stirring, and keep those crystals down off the pot, and you don't want any crystals building up around it at all when it's cooling and while you're doing it. And once you successfully invert the sugar, um, it becomes a lot faster, I guess, fermenting, and the yeast are happier, and it's actually a sweeter uh, it's a sweeter sugar than just like the sucrose alone. So a lot of your candy makers and what's the pastry makers and stuff, they'll invert a lot of sugar because of that as well, because it's really, really sweet. Simple hacks for adding more flavor to an apple brandy on a thumper still. Asking for a friend. First and foremost, use all apples, apple juice, apple concentrate. Never use water. I see a lot of people, mulch up a lot of it, and they say, okay, add so many gallons of water. No, ever, never. Use apple juice instead of water. Never use water. Concentrates. Using those concentrates helps a lot. And in your infuser, pureed apples, and like an applesauce, apple cider. Also, using ciders can add some spice and some interesting flavors. So um, definitely 160 for 2 hours. Yeah, that's what are we talking about, Chris? Yeah, yeah. You definitely want to go slow on your conversion limbic, but 236 Fahrenheit. You need one of your candy thermometers, because the second you get to that temperature, and get to that point, most of your water has boiled off. So just a little bit of water that's on your silicone brush that you're keeping all the crystals off. Definitely. Um, no, 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 no. You don't invert the sugar and juice. Just water and sugar, and heat it up, and add your acid, and there's some pretty good processes for making it. But here they call it the Maillard reactions that create the color and flavor. That's the caramelization. It's called a Maillard reaction, and you definitely want to minimize those. So um, yeah, go slow. Yeah, yeah, you can do some cider and do some concentrates as well. And are you using fresh apples or just pretty much apple juice? Because it takes like last time I read is like 22 to 24 pounds of apples to press into a gallon of apple juice. So yeah, that apple juice becomes a lot more attractive when you start thinking about how much it's going to cost to get that gallon otherwise. Yeah, or maybe a gallon or two of cider with absolutely, Richard. Yeah, and you can put apple sauce in your infuser if you wanted to, or apple puree, or you know. But be careful with cinnamon. If you want to add some cinnamon and get a little bit of a spicy, apple cinnamon, just be real careful about how much cinnamon you use, because it can be really strong, especially in an infuser and a thumper. Yeah, coffee shine's good, man. Mark Morgan makes some really good coffee shine. Man, the thing about it, you can drink a lot of it, man, because it kind of, you think you're getting that. I don't know. They say there's no caffeine carrying through, but damn, I don't know, man. I drink quite a bit of it. I drank about probably a quart that day of not just mixed shine. This is at Maggie this past year. Excuse me. And then I ran into Mark. We went up to Mark's place and sat around there for hours. And I drank on a quart of his coffee shine. I about polished that one off too. So I was almost 2 quarts in that day. I drank a good quart and a half of shine that day, man. I was speaking in tongues, I think. But yeah, it makes some really good shine. It's too clean. Yeah, mine. When I do brandies and stuff, I tend to do it in a different way than just like stripping it all off and then mixing it with water and then rerunning it. Um, yeah, yeah, that's when you get that caramelization, Richard. Yeah, that's when yeah, the color, the flavor. But I tend to do it a little bit different. Um, Instead of mixing it back with water, um, I'll use the back set, you know, and that's where all the flavor still is. Because when you're distilling it, you're removing the alcohol in the water, but you're leaving what behind, all that flavor. So a lot of times I'll just dump it all back in there and rerun it. Once I get all the heads and fours off, and well, Chris, you just got to get on Google and start getting on that telephone, brother. But talked to Alan about it, and he was telling me that. And I was talking about it earlier. Now I can't think of it, but that's the same method that they use in making some other liquors as well. And well, I just mentioned it earlier. Boy, I'm telling you, it's getting bad. And then when I try to think of it, it makes it harder to think. But anyway, it'll come to me in a minute. But instead of mixing it with water, I'll mix it back with the back set and with all that flavor from the back set, run it again. And also if you want to infuse or throw some fresh chopped up apples or whatever in your infuser or thumper to help bring more flavor forward. Yeah, you can. Yeah, apples do work well with grain. It's probably one of the best fruits to do mountain brandy with is apple rye. Makes a great you know brandy, or I guess you could say mountain brandy. So a lot of people do the apple rye combo. It's pretty good for rye. Sour brandy. We were talking about that last week about rerunning fruits. I would say that you would have to deal with some spoilage, and some other things that grains typically aren't going to do as much of. So I would say you could probably do a couple runs, maybe. Some people said they've had success doing it. So I would say, yeah, that would be, something to try, something I've not done. I've done the Dunder pits with the rums, and I've done the sour mashes, but I've not done the rerunning a lot of the fruits. But last week we were talking, and some people, they had chimed in, so they've done it with some success. So definitely. Think about doing a slop mash. Anything fermentable in it, but kind of worried it would turn out nasty. I would say it would, Kim, if you just, but you never know. The problem with things like that is you start throwing a bunch of shit in there. You never know. And all of a sudden you get something good. And it's like you can't replicate it because you can't remember everything you threw in it. So if you do, document everything. Yeah, I would say probably get a better result that way with concentrates and juice. But what are we carrying forward from the last? I guess with back set, just carrying it forward with the back set. Trying to remember that word. I can't. It's killing me. And I was just talking about it 30, 40 minutes ago. Now I can't remember it. Getting old, boys. Getting old. Yeah, I'd say it'd be good. I mean, there's a lot of concentrated flavors in that back set. Cognac. God bless. Why couldn't I think of cognac? That's what it is. Anytime that, like what I do is I pour it back into the back set and run it again. That's how they do cognac. And I can't believe I couldn't. I just said that like 40 minutes ago. It took me 10 minutes to come up with the word again. Man, mine's a terrible thing to waste, to lose. So we get it figured out. But cognac, yeah. So basically stripping like we were talking about, Limbic, um, stripping everything off like you would with your apple. And then when you're proofing it down to run it again, instead of just pouring water in there, don't do that. Use your back set to proof it down with, and just do percentages. Don't, your back set's going to have some tails in it, probably still too, which will be beneficial. But just use math. Just say, this is all this liquor here's 120 proof, and this back set, I've got half and half. That should take me to 60 proof, which would be plenty below the 80 proof that you need to be safe. So just kind of do that, math and just run your back set. Run it again with that back set. You'll carry a lot more flavor forward using that back set, and you'll get more ethanol because you still got some tails in there at the same time. But taste that back set sometime, man. It is concentrated flavors, and it's not necessarily good because of the way it's concentrated, but that taste will sit on your tongue all day, man. It's yeah, it's wild. But it's all it is, when you have all that flavor and you're distilling the alcohol and the water out, that's all you're leaving behind. And if you don't overheat it and kind of, scorch it or make it bad, it'll continue to carry that good flavor forward, on that second run. So that's a little secret. That's a little secret a lot of people don't do, but that's why they do cognac. And that's why it carries a lot of that flavor forward. But earlier I was talking about when you're doing some research online, there's some really good sources for information, and there's some that just are trash, and unfortunately a lot of them aren't that great. But I go to American Distilling Institute and their forums a lot, and that's really good. George has some great info for beginners and intermediates, that's really beneficial. But Hard thing about Georgia is you'd have to watch a lot of videos to get your questions answered because you can't really index it. So it's tough. Thanks for joining us, Mitch. Awesome, brother. God bless you. And jump on Facebook, join the militia if you get on there. If not, jump on here every Wednesday and Saturday, 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. Eastern. Take care. Yeah, it is, man. It's a lot of fun. I love distilling and different things. I like trying a lot of different things. I grew up doing pretty much thin mash and corn liquor, and I did that for many, many, many years. So doing brandies and wines is something kind of new. So I'm kind of doing a lot of that and having a lot of fun with that. So have a good one, Mitch. Come back and see us on Saturday. We're here at the same back channel, brother. But yeah, doing a lot of wines. Yeah, they are, especially answering questions in this kind of setting, kind of informal, and you can ask your questions and we can all discuss it. And, I can pull up web pages and show you on here and charts and stuff. It's a lot of fun. I guess I've had that chart up for a long time. Oh, I'd really go back to the chart. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy it. And that's why we set up the groups, so we can help people because, it's a lot of people are intimidated the first time you do it. I mean, you are dealing with boiling alcohol, and there's dangers inherent in that. There's health risks, inherent in a lot of this. So, people that don't have any questions that jump in head first without, asking any questions or, I don't know, it's wild, reckless, but you know, it's kind of like what I did. I didn't have really any internet. There was no internet back then. There's a Foxfire books, and I had Foxfire book to ask, and every once in a while, I guess you could, find a moonshiner to ask where I grew up, but they weren't usually they weren't very talkative, and they definitely didn't want to talk to some kid like I was. So I learned pretty much everything on my own starting out. Made a lot of mistakes, multiple mistakes, but I made a lot of thin mash, what's called thin mash. It's basically cornmeal, sugar, and water, and bread yeast, and did that for many, many years. Made good corn liquor. I mean, I think I could probably, I'll go up against anybody with making a thin mash, because I did it for so long. But once I started, learning more about other grains, multi grains, malted using malts and conversion, it's like wow, that took it to the next level. Converting, the uh, starches, with malts. That's there wasn't a lot of malts available. Where I grew up back in the day in the '60s and '70s. There wasn't a lot of malts to to buy. So you got a bunch of jars in the closet that's not good. Well, I mean, you can run them. I mean, if you as long as it's not scorched, um, usually you can fix things, or you can put them on a column and just neutralize them. You can get a column and use some reflux. You get a deflegmator and do some reflux and pretty much, take all the flavor out of it. Just end up with mostly just a pure ethanol and then use that for like a gin or it's basically essentially a vodka. So from there you can start infusing. You can run it again, proof it down and run it again and start infusing flavors with your jar rigs, your thumpers and or infusion rigs, I should say, infusion chambers, which I do kind of prefer over jars because you don't have to worry about breaking. But it is fun to look at it all bouncing and foaming up in the jar and watching the levels and stuff. It's just something. Look, welcome back, Scott. What's up, brother? Yes, sir. It's all natural sciences. But yeah, it's fun to watch the jar rigs get splashed about and go and but yeah, there is a bit of risk in those. I'd rather use small copper chambers there instead. If you want a little sight glass, you can put it in there, a little portal. Little quite a bit more expensive making them than a jar rig, though. You know, it's not something you can just as easily do at home, but it'd take a little bit more time. But the thing about those, you can put a drain in them, so you don't have to take them off, dump them, and re-infuse and screw them back on. Worry about temperature changes and cracking your jars and all that fun stuff. But if y'all tried dunder pits, there's some people talking about some rums and stuff and molasses and making rums, and it's kind of the sour mash of the rum world is dunder pits, and they keep their back set pretty much, and the bottom of the I guess the east beds and back sets, and pour in fresh molasses and water to you know and blackstrap whatever to redo it, and it builds up kind of like a sour mash, but it's a dunder pit, and those can get pretty interesting and a lot of flavor. Rum isn't hard to do. It's just you got to use nutrients. A lot of people fail to add those nutrients and run into some issues. Having something to buffer the pH, whether it's the stabilizer 5.2 that you can buy, or boil up some the crushed oyster shells, boil them up real good, peel off anything that's in them, and try to neutralize it, make sure there's no off flavors coming out of them. So boil them up and rinse them well, and maybe let them sit in some water for a while, and if you want it, I guess you could boil them a couple times, make sure you get all the any kind of salts or any kind of the critter from the I guess nectar from the oyster, any flavors that may carry over out, so you don't have it to worry about any flavor changes. But you can buy like a 50-pound bag for like $15, 13, $15, Tractor Supply. It's used for chicken, to keep the eggs good and hard for your chickens. It's used in planting. If you do a lot of gardening and stuff, you can use it for that as well. So it's handy. But having you get you some cheesecloth and take that boiled up, uh, break them down into some manageable chunks, and put them in a cheesecloth bag and just throw them in your rum. Um, no, but I've done quite a few of the plum. I do a lot of plum wines, so I've done a lot of plums, but not a lot of figs. What's going on, 420? What's up, brother? So I do like a lot of plums. I've made some really good plum wines, and I've made some good slivovich. I'm sure I'm butchering that term, but it's a brandy made from the prune or plums, and it's good stuff too, real good stuff. But yeah, I like plum wines is really good. Not done the figs, pretty much stuck with the plums, but they work really well. Muscadine wines, absolutely. Yeah, all the grapes. I've done about every kind of grape. Um, I made what I used to make a wine that my fiance loves called Sweet Heat, and she can't drink as much of it now as we found out she's got diabetes, so she don't get to drink it. It's a sweet white wine, and that's what I make my grappa with as well. So I use a lot of the green grapes, but I do a lot of wines. I've got quite a few boxes of wines in my basement here, aging. But yeah, I do a lot of different grapes and wines. Figs, I have to give it a shot, man. If I can find them cheap enough, or find somebody's got figs. I think it'd be awesome, man. Phil Billy makes some interesting stuff, man. He's tried about everything. I mean, for his podcasts and for his shows and stuff that he's done, man, he's done a lot of different things, man. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. That'd be a good combo. Figs and blue. Yeah, that'd be pretty interesting. Carbonating and Damon's like his that watermelon, that sour patch watermelon shit that he makes, man, is fan fucking tastic. That'd be pretty good carbonated as well. Yeah, I think figs and blue corn would be good. Yes, that's got me thinking about some of that. Some of that watermelon. I think is watermelon, that sour watermelon that Damon makes. That'd be all the sour patch shine. That'd be good carbonated, man. It's really good though. It's sweet and sour and it's really good. Just got done making an upgraded 20-foot coil worm bucket from a 13-gallon beaver pot. Absolutely. I'm not sure if it'll speed it up, Trickster, but it'll definitely help take out some of your uh, sulfides and help your flavor. And it'll definitely help the finish flavor, I think. It's definitely a good upgrade. Plus, a 20-foot coil, that'll be good for anytime you upgrade your steel, too. So, is that half inch or 5/8? Did you buy it coiled or did you coil it yourself? Somebody was asking that on the group, and I'm like, man, it's so much easier just to buy coiled tubing in the box than to try to take these straights and bend them, man. Especially if it's the P and not the M. Absolutely, Mr. Lopez. Ask away. 3/8. Awesome. So you did buy it coiled then. Hey, the stovetop bevers are just fine, brother. They work great. The three pots need some work, but like the footballs are pretty decent right out of the box. If you get the three pots, you're going to have to do a little bit of work. You're going to have to make sure you got your down comer right on your little thumper that comes with it, and the condensers on them are generally way undersized. So you're going to kind of need to do what Trickster did and make you a better condenser. Mr. Lopez, are there any other easier ways to gelatinize corn without having to boil it? Well, there is something called yellow label angel yeast out there, and it can um, convert your corn for you. I'm saying this, I know, because it doesn't, strange, foreign, something that you totally different, but you don't even have to gelatinize the corn, Mr. Lopez. You can just take your corn and put it in there at 90 some degrees and put this yellow label angel yeast right on top of it, and it will actually break down all of the long chain carbs into smaller manageable. You don't need alpha amylase, glucoamylase, nothing. It does all the conversions and all that itself, and it works. Flavors, I hear, isn't the best, and it takes a lot longer. That's the trade-off. So if you're lazy and you don't mind waiting, like me, it's awesome. I've got some. I'm going to experiment with it. I've not done it yet, but some people say it works great and it does great and it gets good conversions. They get the right amount of alcohol off of it that they're supposed to, and some people say the flavor just isn't the same. It's a different yeast, so maybe a combination of yeast might be something to try. I'm going to experiment a little bit with it. Um, but this is just going on what other people have said. The only complaint I've really heard is it takes a long time and the flavor's different, than what they're used to. So, but Other than that, there's nothing that I know of that you can get around with from gelatinizing the corn to get that starch out. But there are some easy ways, that you can do it. Um, and that way you don't have to cook the corn and risk scorching it. You can steep it and just keep supplementing it. Or you can put it in like a insulated cooler, or I do like a barrel in a barrel with that foam around it, and it holds that heat a lot longer, and it'll hold, put that boiling water in on your corn, good hot strike temp, stir it real good, oxygenate it real good, let it sit and cover it. And you can also keep a little bit of boiling water to your side. So you use like maybe 3/4 of the water that you need that you're going to use total, and then steep that. And then as it starts dropping down below 190, just add a little bit of that boiling water in till you get done with all that. And by the time you do all that, you should be well past your hour and a half, 2 hour gelatinization time. So it makes it a little easier. You run a lot less risks of scorching your corn, and also using that insulated vessel will help slow down the cooling time, so you get good long rest periods in for your protein rest. And if I hadn't had a drink, I could say securification rest that you need. So letting it cool off slowly and being patient. Not like beer making, where they don't care. They just drop that chiller in there and get her down there, because they're in a hurry, but with ours, we can take our time and let it cool naturally. And when it gets to 150s, in the 150s range, we can throw our barleys in there and wheats and other stuff, at the temps that's required. And I will throw that up there for you for people that don't know. And let's see, where's my chart there for that? And there's the chart for that. And you can see in the green here is the securification range that you want to do your rests in. But this is the range of temperatures for conversion that you have to have it to convert. You can actually you can gelatinize corn at lower temperatures than the 190 to 210, but it just takes exponentially longer. So, you can do 2 hours at 190 to 210, or you can do 12 hours at 170 or something like that crazy. It's just so much longer. It's just, yeah, you want to use the hotter water. It's just so much, it's faster. All right, let's see. Definitely a good deal. Yeah, I've seen some people asking how to bend the tubing, and trying to pack it with sand, heat it up, and use pipe benders and stuff it's not the way to go, man. It's to get the softer coil. It's easy to work with, and it works just as well as anything. Get you some fig trees, brother. Get a bunch of fruit trees, all kinds, man. I mean, if you got land or your family's got land and you're young, start planting shit. Start planting blackberries, blueberries, get all your berries, raspberries planted, get you some fruit trees planted. A lot of those raspberries and blackberries, plant them along your fence lines and use the fence to help support them. You can do grapes the same way. Get you some muscadine and plant those. But definitely, if you got some family with land that's been around, not going anywhere, that do it. Don't wait. Don't wait till you get old and think, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have. Had a dome lid with a 1.5 tri-clamp on it. Works great. Absolutely. Yep. I love the Webers. Mine, I think the 13th and the 18th have a 2.5-inch tri-clamp on them. So I had to use a little reducer to bring it down to 2. And I use a 2-inch, tubing and stuff on mine, and it's great, man. It's such a versatile little steel for the money. It's and the same thing on a keg. I think kegs are 2 inch, so you don't even have to get the reducer for those. But having that ferrule on there to where you can put in a whiskey head or a little column and shotgun condensers. There's so much you can do. It's just it's pretty much sky's the limit. Use 1650 watt internal element on my 8 gallon. It really makes you have to be careful on clearing a mash. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Anytime you have that internal elements, I've seen some with little cages and stuff, but that's not going to have help when you got like a thick soupy mash with small particulates. That's just no, I've seen too many. I've not done the elements, and I've always been wary of them. Everybody swears by them, but I've also seen nightmares of people pulling their elements out and all kinds of crud stuck to it, burnt to it. I don't know, man. I'd love to try it and get it going right because I do clear mine pretty well. But by the same token, if you clear it up so much, you're losing a little bit of flavor when you get it clear, clear, clear. So there's again a happy medium there to where, a little bit of milkiness. Now I don't mean solids, but I mean just a little bit of discoloration to your water, milkiness isn't going to kill you for gas or stove or induction, but direct element, I guess is still all right. Not done that yet, so I don't know. I've been thinking about it. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they've done carbonate shine. I've carbonate some wines to make champagnes, and yeah, the little beavers are great. The beavers with the domed lid and the footballs. They have different sizes. I think 13 to 18 is a good size. It's getting large, so if you got a stove with a fan hood above it, you're going to have to pull that stove out, to run it because, that fan hood or that microwave is going to be in the way. So you got to be able to have enough, cable to pull that stove out and get some clearance. But once you do, as long as your stove, like we were talking about earlier, doesn't cycle heat on, off, and stays pretty constant on, you'll do fine stovetop. But you have to make sure that it's a constant on and not a cycling, because if it cycles, you'll get heads and hearts pretty much at a pretty constant amount throughout the whole run. And it doesn't cook off early. A lot of it, the higher percentages don't cook off early. It can kind of, you can kind of get some heads and stuff throughout the run where it's not that don't work real well. Yeah, yeah. With a lot of the beaver, like the 3 pots, don't have the domed lid. They're like a flat lid. So if you've just like boiled water, I mean, you can't even boil water without it foaming up like crazy on you. So beer, which is what your grain mash is essentially, is a beer. So it's got carbonation naturally in there. So yeah, it's gonna foam. So if you don't degas, but you can degas and help. You can throw a little butter in there, some vegetable or something and help. But yeah, you're gonna get some puking and some foaming up. So having that dome lid helps, gives you a little bit of extra headspace for the foam to dissipate and fall, just like boiling water. So yeah. Um, but I don't like the worm sitting on top of the pots like those 3 pot setups. There's a lot of heat up there, and it keeps your condenser water hotter, and the little copper coils that come with them aren't just enough. you have to keep that condenser water really, really cold to make it efficient. So what you want to do is just replumb it and go to your worm and get it a little bit further away from your pot. And you can use different copper fittings instead of that flexi stuff. You can just go with a solid copper over and kind of eliminate that and upgrade your plumbing and have a better worm, and a lot better worm. That way you don't have to, keep that condenser water so cold and cycling so fast because it gets hot so quick in that little teeny little pot that comes with it with that like 3 coils and it's in a little pot. It's just not enough. So it's not efficient enough. So, but those pots for what you pay for them and what you get, it's a great value. You just have to make some modifications to make them optimal. And I think Philbilly, I think Appalachian Plateau had the pretty nice little dome, copper dome tops for those. So you can check those guys out. They do good work, good people. Lazy man shine. That's right. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Or flaked. You can use flake corn. Yeah, I should have thought about that. Thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Lopez. Um, yeah, without gelatin, you can get flake corn. I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, you can get flake corn, or like Curtis was talking about, grits, and they're already gelatinized. So the flake, when it goes through the steam rolling process to flake it, that temperature gelatinizes those. So those are ready to go, and they're already gelatinized. Thanks for pointing that out, brother. I wasn't even thinking that way. I'm too busy thinking about that yellow label angel yeast, man. I'm so stoked about trying that out. I got some on Amazon that was on sale. Normally, I think it's like 35. I got picked up a brick for 25. So I'm going to experiment with some rice. And can't have no wife whining. Take it easy, brother. We'll see you Saturday, man. But yeah, I'm really anxious to try the yellow label on some rice and some corn. Yep. Yeah, it does. And you can go in even hotter than that. You're not having to worry about, unless it's a malted corn, then you're going to have to, of course, you're going to have to do it at a lot lower temperature, when you deal with that. And that's really difficult to do. So let's not even talk about that. It's hard because you have to do it at a low temperature for a long, long time. And it sucks. With the high temp amylase that we've got these days, yeah, just 190, 210 boiling water, pour it to it, and just do it. If you do it in a something that's insulated, helps a lot. Helps hold that temperature a lot. Coolers work well. Uh, Double barrels with you get like a big 55 barrel, and then you get like a 40, and just put maybe some regular block foam in the bottom to lift it up off the bottom, and then get some of that spray foam around it, and foam it up good, and those will hold temp just really well in summer and winter. And you can use I guess, your little fish tank heaters in there in the wintertime, and it'll keep them toasty. I do have some patterns. I will share some of those, and anybody wanting them, I will upload them to the militia page. Richard, I will send them to you personally. But yeah, I've got some. Glad you brought that up. That was something we were going to talk about today. Damn, and time's flown. But we have talked about beginner stills and stuff. I guess I could pull up something and just a second here. Let me pull up a picture page just so we can I can point to some pictures as I've described some things. Let me see here. Let's get this chart down. Dang on it, why does it always do that? All right, so let me share this page. Let's see. All right, here we go. All right, now this is just pulling up some typical steels. This is alembic. This is an alembic setup here. For those that are new, this is pretty nice boiler here. Looks like a jacketed setup. They call this like a milk can setup. And then you've got like a digi boils that have, you know, plug in that make a lot of beer. This particular one's probably not a digi boil. But here's the columns like what we were talking about. Here's a pretty decent oak steel column that you can put on top. And this is a deflagmator here and condenser here. Pretty nice little setup. Oops, it didn't open up that different page. Okay, let's see. Let's go to images. So here we got like a good onion head on like a milk can setup, and that's a little onion head here, if you can see it. Yeah, that's perfect. So there's a nice little onion head there. That's get a little bit of reflux in those. Sight glass directly into a little, looks like a Liebig condenser there. But I'm looking for some Vevers to show some of the, maybe I should just search Vever or keg. Let's do some keg steel. All right, so you can get caps like this on your keg steel, kind of like a whiskey cap, into a thumper, into, you know, your condenser here. I would recommend putting a little bypass right here, though. Compliments me. But yeah, this is a typical little keg steel setup here. Got just your keg, got a little short tower here, column, and that'll, you know, that'll help prevent a lot of foam ups. But you don't want to fill this up to the top. You know, so you're going to here, and you can put this on a gas burner. And this is just a Liebig, the most simple um, condensers. You got your water coming in here, cold water in, and then coming out. You're always going to go in at the bottom. It doesn't matter if it's a worm flake stand or a Liebig or shotgun condenser. Always go in with your cold water at the bottom, and your return coming out the top. Um, Pretty decent little keg setup here. Got a nice cap. I think that's one we were looking at a minute ago. So Billy and a lot of other places will, you know, sell you caps like this. You can get your little thumper. You know, he'll make you these with an infusion port here. Ask you to put my bypass on there technology so you can bypass, keep the heads and fours out of there until you're ready to, you know, hit that with the hearts. But yeah, there's a lot of nice little keg setups, columns like this. This stuff puts out a really high proof right here. This column setup will definitely. No problem, brother. Anytime. Trying to answer some questions here while we look at those. Yeah, 2.5. Yeah, it's 2.5 inch. So I had to get a little converter for 2.5 inch down to 2. But I can use that on my keg or my Vever or my big steel. But here's a pretty nice little uh, thumper with an infusion port. and drain. It's awesome. Or if you got a big setup, you can use these like the infusion jars, so you can get a little bit smaller, like if this was a gallon, and you have like a, 20, 30 gallon setup, you can have a little copper infusion, like a jar, but copper rig, like I was talking about. So you imagine this being like a gallon and using it for infusions instead of a jar, and you won't have to worry about breakage. And you could always cut your little, sight glass port here, a little portal with a glass so you can look at it. But having something like that with a little bit of a drain, it's a 20 liter, but it's, I'm saying this would be scaled down, for one of those, something like that. But this volume being like a gallon or a half gallon, and in and out, infusion port here, and drain instead of a jar rig. But I mean, Fieldbilly and most all these steel builders, they can take care of you and get you set up. We've got a few on the militia page. I would try Fieldbilly. If he's too busy, can't get you, then maybe somebody else. You'll refer somebody. Um, but here's what I was talking about on some of the bever ones. It sits right on top. Usually it's a really small. It's sitting up here on the hot pot to begin with, and you have to really have a lot of cold water circulating. You have to. I used to use a drinking, just a regular thing of ice water frozen to sit down in the middle of that. You know what I'm talking about? Just regular old, you know, drinking water. Freeze that and then set it down inside that to help regulate the temperature. But it's best just to get somebody, if you're not um, able to, make you a good flake or a warm bucket and a bigger coil. That way you'd be a lot more efficient, because the way Weber sets these on top of the steel, it's really not large enough or efficient enough. So it's a good idea to upgrade those. But I will definitely send you the plans. Anybody that wants the patterns, message me on Facebook or jump on the militia page and look in the file sections. I'll upload what I can find tonight and some more possibly tomorrow. I've got like thousands of files to look through, and they're not all named properly. So I have plans that are probably named, PL9499936 dot, uh, dot Adobe, PDF or whatever. And it's like, you can't tell from the title what the hell it is. So I'm trying to clean up my files and identify things with better names, so they're searchable. So that's something that's coming up as well. But here's one of those kegs I was talking about. It has a nice little clean out welded into the top. Oh hell, it didn't carry over. Let's see. I wish that would have been. You can see it right here. It's got. Why didn't it show? It's pulling it up in a new page. All right, but here's like a 3-inch, 4-inch clean out. That's a 4-inch, and there's a 2-inch, regular tri clamp. But yeah, that's a nice little 4. I used to use a keg for a lot back then. I didn't have that, and cleaning it out was a pain in the ass because I didn't have a pressure washer either. But now they've got these little heads that you can mount on your pressure washer that do the spiral thing. It goes around in circles and it shoots water out the sides. So as you're just dropping it down in the keg, it's scouring the sidewalls and sending some forward. Fucking awesome. I would have loved to have that shit back in the 80s, when I was using the keg and having to try to hold it upside down with it, spraying it with the garden hose and the sprayer. It's quite the fun. But yeah, we didn't have all that back then. But yeah, that's really nice having a big clean out port, and you can reach in there and scrub if you got to, because there's, I don't know, a lot of people, if you look inside your what's going on, Donald? If you look inside your pot and look right at the level of where the water boils, all that foaming up and stuff, it'll leave it, a whole layer of crud all the way around. So, if you never saw the inside of your keg, which I never did, you don't see all that stuff, and you're just letting it, just rinsing it out, letting it go. Well, just a simple rinse with the garden hose ain't cutting it, man. So yeah, it's having that pressure wash of that head, man. That would have been so awesome. I used to have, every once in a while I'd take it to the car wash and spray it out, but that doesn't look it's questionable, does it? Somebody cleaning their keg. But one thing about having a keg still is when it's taken apart and sitting in the corner, it just looks like an old keg. It doesn't look like a moonshine still sitting there. So it kind of, blends in pretty well. Hell yeah, Dave. Past time. I'm gonna have another sippy sip of this select Bloody Butcher Sour Mash. Compliments of Jeffrey. Thank you, sir. Little Singleton shine. Makes good stuff, man. Good stuff. Uh-oh, I can't see your picture limit, Dave. That's all I see is that little thing there. All right, Kimbo. Take it easy, brother. Do not use gas net, too nosy neighbors for all that. Yeah. And I wouldn't in the house either. I've had great success during the winter times when I use the stove. Um, I got a new stove, so I kept the old one because it's been so nice, and I can put that big 18.5 bever on there and still not worry about it. It burns solid. I don't think my neighbors would like it if I moved it outside, so maybe I'm move it down to the basement and have a canning range and oven down there for my canning purposes. We do a lot of canning. Yeah, Appalachian Plateau. Yeah, yeah, they make a nice copper dome um, for the bevers. Pretty nice, and they're good people. Let's see, Appalachian Plateau Copper Co. LLC. Sean Peterman. Oh, I can't think of his damn name, man. I've met him twice. He's a great guy, but it's like fucking stupid brain doesn't work sometimes, man. Yeah, Sean's a great guy. He was camped next to us at Farm to Bottle last year. Had a great time. Yeah, they do good work. Good guys. I'm sure they'll be at Farm to Bottle again this year if y'all want to come meet them. But yeah, they make a pretty interesting dome to go on top of the bevers and some other attachments. I'm not sure if Phil, Billy, and Wes have those yet, but if not, I'm sure they can hammer it out for you, or do you a horse head or something. Because I know I think Wes been doing a lot of horse heads, and he does good work. The Sandman, he makes barrels too, so a lot like the Bad Mo barrels, he does barrels as well. Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to experiment with it. Yeah. Yeah. One thing, if you're doing gas, you definitely want to get the banjo burners because they don't make a lot of noise like the big jet burners. Like, so we were listening to somebody the other day, man. They had their damn jet burners going. He's like, it's like, man, a F-15 inside his garage. It was fairly loud, and it's like, man, that's a lot louder than my banjo burners. But I've got one on my turkey fryer that I use for boiling water, and they're great for boiling water. But when it comes to cooking, I definitely want my banjos. Yeah, yeah. Anything you can do to retain the heat. Just be careful not to burn them blankets up. Your lady's gonna put the smack on you. Yeah. Let's see if I can find it pink. I have to scroll through the whole damn page to find it. Let's see. I can go to the web. Let's see. Let's see here if I can't grab one real quick. Yeah, here we go. All right. Let me see where I'm putting this. All right. Let me see. Save. Close that. And let's see. Image. Pictures. Here we go. This is the cabin. This will fit right on top of your Vever. And then go into a nice little horse head. Or you could do an elbow here if you didn't want to get a little horse head reflux. But nice setup. If I'm not mistaken, those are like $350. I may be wrong. I hate pricing. This is for the 13, and this is a 4-inch and 4-inch here. But if I'm not mistaken, I think they're $350, but I might be wrong, so I'm not going to quote that. So if I'm wrong, I'm going to be like, "What the hell you doing? Pricing that shit slow. We don't sell." But yeah, that's the setup that they have, and it's pretty slick. Definitely nice. And that's catering to a market that really needs it. Feelability, does that as well. There's a lot of Evers out there, so they're smart by making stuff for those Vevers to help upgrade. But that is definitely a big upgrade for a Vever pot. It's nice, and I'd say Feelability and them could hammer that out for you too if you needed. But talk to Peterman or Feelability, and they can get you taken care of. But I'm going to, Red Star makes a great yeast. Red Star makes an excellent yeast, or a whole line of yeast. I like the Lalvin and Red Star. The Red Star makes a Premier Blanc that I like using with a lot of my wines, and a Premier Rouge that I use with a lot of my wines. Both of those are really good wine and champagne yeasts. I use those a lot. I'll use EC 1118, for fermentations or higher sugar, fermentations, and then I'll use like a Datey or a Firm Solutions yeast for the grains. I just picked up some. I think it's like 927 or something like that. That Firm Solutions has that. Everybody's talking about these days. ferment is some really good yeast. And so, I mean, I used to just use bread yeast. Bread yeast works fine too. I mean, it's just, but experiment with your yeast because your yeast will give you a lot of different flavors and stuff. So, you can experiment with your yeast to get some, interesting different flavors, and profiles. Started 12 gallons, 26 pounds of sugar wash, and it was very active. I would say it was. Generally, yeah, about 2 pounds. 2 pounds per gallon is puts you about a 108 dose. You might have had a little bit higher than that, but next time, if you can, buffer it a little bit with some again the crushed oyster shells that are boiled and cleaned up pretty good, or a good buffer 5.2 whatever. Um, and a little bit of nutrients, a little DAP, and you'll get a really good sugar wash fermentation for what it is. A lot of people turn their nose up at the sugar shines once they've tasted the all grains and all that. And, they get a little bit snobby sometimes. But there's nothing wrong with a good old sugar wash every once in a while just to turn out some freaking liquor, man, that you can drink. Sometimes, I just want to drink something that I get hammered on and not want to wait, in a long period of time, or I don't have to wait and get grains. You can throw a little bit of cornmeal in there to feed it and go on with it. Um, a lot of them will come with it, but really, I don't do elements yet, Mr. Lopez, so I've not done them, but I've seen them that I would say it depends. You would have to have something that you have access, or like a large 4-inch clean out or something that you can actually get it in there and work on it. Because I'm not sure if it would fit into, along with the element itself when you plug it into this 2-inch ferrule. But yeah, they have some screens and stuff that go around them. Definitely want to use stainless though, instead of using just a regular coil. I think the stainless would be a little bit cleaner. Yeah, there was an Olympic in all those pictures. That was one of the first ones I pointed out. I think it was on the top though, up here at the top. But yeah, I definitely don't have plans for an Olympic because those are something you have to pretty much that's hammered out and use English wheel or whatever, and that's pretty complicated and art. But yeah, there's one at the top, I think, Dave. How many feet of 5/8 copper would I need for a 3-gallon condenser? Um, Now, your pot's 3 gallons, or the condenser bucket is 3 gallons. 5/8. I would tend to Paul. I would tend to not really size it to the steel that you have right now. I would size it to overkill. That way you can grow and still use the same, worm, and not have to try to rig something new together. Because really, you can't. It's hard to overkill it because once it's condensed, it'll just come on out the bottom, right? So even if it's got to go through a few extra coils, even if it comes out a little cooler, once it does drip, that's a big nothing burger. It doesn't really matter. But just having enough, so maybe just go with a 5-gallon bucket and a 10 or 15 feet, coil would be a pretty good, yeah, 5-gallon bucket with a 15-foot coil, and get your what do they call them, just the type of mount, bulkhead mount to come out of your bucket at the bottom, and And you're going to have a couple bulkheads. One that'll hold your output from your worm, and then the other one will be a input for the cold water. You'll want to go into the bottom with your cold water and come out of the top with a larger one. So you can go in with a 1/2 inch hose adapter into the bottom, and then maybe out of the top of it, come out with 1.5 inches that's just going PVC or whatever. It doesn't matter coming out. It doesn't matter what type of piping that you use, because this is just water. But having something larger, for your return means that you can turn the water flow up a little bit to get more water flow and to get a better cooling without having to worry about it overfilling, because it's not a closed um, condenser like a canister would be. With those little condensers, those little pots that come with it, well, they have holes in it, so they're useless. Yeah, but I tell you what, it's something if you want to practice welding on. It's good if you want to take a little ferrule and try to weld and practice welding and practice, brazing copper to stainless. They might be good to keep just to practice with or something like that. Yeah, I agree. 15. Yeah, that should be fine. Welcome back, Chris. Heck yeah, man. You got your bad mo barrel. Yeah, it's those do well, but they require the time of a regular barrel. It's not like a quick, you know, stave or spiral thing. It definitely takes some more time. So yeah, actually, Curtis, I've heard people, I never thought about this when I was younger, but they take the little sand and pebbles, those little round pebbles that you can get, and they'll put those in their keg with some water and turn it or let it roll down the hill and let those little rocks and sand, kind of clean the inside. I thought that was really ingenious. I never thought about doing that when I was younger. Yeah, people come up with a lot of ways to clean them because it's a pain in the ass. But that old spiral from the pressure washer thing, man, that's the trick for sure. I am definitely ready for another shot. I don't know if I need another sour mash shot. Cheers. So what is that, Jeff? 130? It's got a little bit of heat to it. Yeah, yeah, excellent. Yep, excellent. All right, Dave. Thanks for dropping me in, brother. We'll see. Thank you, sir. And drop back in here, man. We're on here on Wednesday nights and Saturday nights, 8 Eastern. So catch us on Wednesdays and Saturdays, hump days and Saturdays, brother. We'll sit and talk and bring you questions and heck, help answer some. Yeah, I don't cook it like that anymore either. I do the steep. No, that works. Are you using gas? Be real careful if you're using gas, and be extra careful in your house. It's my buddy Phil Marfugel Phil out there in Washington. He distills inside as well, and he's got had a beverage, and I guess he didn't get it clamped down just right this one time, and wasn't paying attention. You know how we all become lax once we do things a few times. It's like the old hat. We start not paying as much attention. But he'd left the room and he came back, and boom, everything was on fire, man. It bubbled out on him, and steam was shooting out, ignited, and I guess it had built up in the room before it ignited, and when it ignited, it caught a lot of the ceiling and stuff on fire. So he had a fire extinguisher and put it out. So definitely good timing coming back in when he did. But from now on, after that point, anytime somebody new talks about, the equipment needed to get started, always include fire extinguisher, because especially no matter where or what you're doing, just keep one handy, because it's not if, it's when. It's just so easy. While you're distilling, take a few shots, you can get hammered, pass out, get busy on Facebook, looking at your phone. It's just, there's just so many things that you can do to, you know, let your guard down. And when you do, man, bad shit starts happening. So uh, definitely be real careful if you're inside, for sure. But I do inside too. But I'm very careful. I nodded off once, and that scared the shit out of me. So anytime that happens, I just turn the heat on and come back and start it again. When I pour the heads into my car, um, if your car is set up to run E85, I guess you can mix it with your gasoline a little bit, pure heads. I know it will work. I've seen the videos and stuff, but that was somebody with a computer tuner too, and tuning for that specific mix. Definitely saw a slight reduction in horsepower, but I mean, it will work. Um, yeah, four shots are the first thing that generally comes off. Four shots are generally called methanol, um, and heads are generally have more acetone, ethyl acetates in it. But yeah, both of them are higher proof, generally real high proof. First things that come off, but at the same time, for a fuel, you don't want the water that's in it sometimes. So most fuel makers, they run columns, and they'll produce or an alkalometer, or an alkalometer. It's a column set up for high proof, and it'll come off like 185 to 195 ish, and that's about as high as you can get. So when you get that high proof, yeah, it's going to be okay to substitute for like an E85 with gasoline, but it's expensive. It's best just to find you a good gas station that sells, E85, and buy it for there, and save the heads to clean your glass, or clean your steel parts, or clean metal before you weld it, or kill grass, or I use it for cleaning your glasses, cleaning your the fats and stuff off a range after you cook some bacon or something. I mean, it's good for a lot of things. We sat around and just brainstormed on all the different things you could do with it. We made quite the list of what people use four shots and stuff for, and heads. But yeah, if you got a woman, she can use it for a fingernail polish remover as well. Yeah. Saw outdoor boys Alaska video where natives use the fours as camping. Absolutely. I mean, that stuff, it burns readily. I mean, I know a lot of people that use it, when they're charcoal, they use it as a charcoal starter. So paint thinner. I mean, the uses are endless. I mean, man, we came up with some really long lists, and that'd be, something maybe we'll do someday when we get bored. We'll start us a new list of all the different things that we can use fours and heads for. But there's a lot of good things. I don't throw them away, unless you want a drain cleaner. But yeah, probably not best to pour them down the drain like that. Yeah, yeah. They've got the sizes, so if you tell them what size bever you got, they'll know exactly what size you need. You know, if you got a 13, if you got, 8.5 or whatever sizes, 18.5, whatever size you got, they know. They know. I appreciate you, brother. Love you too, man. I hope you're getting better. Yeah, yeah. I'm the same, man. I can't do my gas inside. Yeah, it cleans wax and red. You can definitely clean your pots. Uh, So definitely can do all that for sure. Yeah, if you have bongs and pipes, it'll clean those up quite well. If you got pipe cleaners and stuff, you can clean all that stuff up real well with it. So all that works great. Oh, but we're at the 11 o'clock mark, and I'm getting tired. I think Anne's already gone up, so I better go give her a little peck before she goes. Kiss, peck her, I should say. Kiss before she goes to bed. But thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're on Facebook, hit that like button, and all those little reactions help. If you're on YouTube, I don't know what buttons on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up or the like button there, and share with your friends. And be sure to meet us, back again on Saturday at 8 o'clock. We'll be here, same time, same bat channel. I hope I answered everybody's questions. If not, don't feel bad about repeating your question. If I miss it, if I skip by it, it's totally by my mistake, and so don't feel bad about asking it again, or saying, did you miss my question or something like that, because I don't want to miss anything. But it's sometimes hard for me to keep caught up with the questions. But I do love all the questions, so keep them coming, and hope everybody's mashes do well, and hope your distillates come out well. And we'll catch y'all again on Friday night for the shit show. And if you can't be here for that, it's just a fun. It's not very informative. We just sit around, talk shit, and have a good time. Talk about politics and anything that comes to light. But Saturday, 8 o'clock Eastern, we'll be right here, same bat channel. So everybody have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you this weekend. Shine on, everybody. Love you, Dave. Love y'all. Take care.